So, Elon's SpaceX just went public recently, right? I was digging through their S1 filing and I was like, wait, what is this? Our vision is to build the technology needed to make humanity multiplanetary and to understand the nature of the universe. And then get this. Our target market includes space tourism, passenger transport to the moon and Mars, and asteroid mining. Honestly, I couldn't believe they're selling these sci-fi ideas at a mind-blowing $1.77 trillion valuation, especially when their operating loss last year was sitting at a massive $2.6 billion. Pretty wild, right? So, in today's video, we're going to dissect SpaceX's actual business model. Quick heads up, this video is compiled from various public sources. If you notice anything that needs a fact check, drop a comment below. Also, full disclaimer, this content is for educational and entertainment purposes only, not financial advice. Always do your own research and consult a licensed financial advisor before making any moves. All right, first up, let's rewind the clock and look at how it all started. The story begins back in 2001. Elon Musk was 30 years old, freshly pocketing around $180 million after PayPal was acquired by eBay. Now, based on the standard Silicon Valley playbook, and honestly mine too, the next move would be buying a super yacht, living the good life, or starting a VC fund. But Elon did something completely off script. He logged onto NASA's website to check where the US was at with sending humans to Mars. And he realized something shocking. There was no plan. Like at all. The same agency that landed humans on the moon back in 1969, over 30 years later, didn't even have an official roadmap to go beyond low Earth orbit. Musk's initial idea sounded pretty romantic, maybe even a bit naive. It was a project called Mars Oasis, landing a miniature greenhouse on Mars, growing plants in Martian soil, and snapping a photo of that first green sprout on the red planet, all to get the American public hyped about space travel again. The end goal? Help NASA secure more funding from Congress to actually make it happen. And this is where the real business story kicks off. Elon realized that the most expensive part of space wasn't the satellites or the greenhouse. It was the ride itself, the rocket required to break gravity. Back then, buying an American rocket cost an absolute fortune. So, Musk and a few buddies flew to Russia to buy decommissioned ICBMs, planning to retrofit them into launch vehicles. But the trip was a total disaster. The asking price was way too high, and the Russian negotiators literally laughed in their faces, thinking they weren't serious. But on the flight back to the States in early 2002, while his team was drowning their sorrows in booze, Musk pulled out his laptop and started crunching numbers on Excel. One of his companions recalled the exact moment Musk turned the screen around and said something that changed the entire industry. "Hey guys, I think we can build this rocket ourselves." That spreadsheet became the foundation of SpaceX's core playbook, first principles thinking. He broke down a rocket's cost to its raw material level: aerospace-grade aluminum, titanium, copper, and carbon fiber. And guess what? The raw material cost was only about 2 to 3% of the rocket's retail price, meaning the other 97% was just overhead, multiple layers of subcontractors markup, and the institutional laziness of an industry that hadn't innovated in decades. For a tech guy like Musk, the takeaway was obvious. This wasn't a physics problem. Physics allowed it. This was purely a manufacturing efficiency problem. And manufacturing problems can be solved. Later on, Musk formalized this mindset into a metric he cheekily calls the idiot index. You calculate it by taking the retail price of a finished part and dividing it by the cost of its raw materials. The higher the ratio, the more overpriced that part is. Think of it like paying $20 for an omelet when the eggs inside cost $1. A high idiot index means there's massive room to manufacture it way cheaper yourself. One of the most famous stories involved a simple door latch. An aerospace supplier quoted them $1,500 for a single flight-certified latch. Elon asked, "What's so special about this thing?" And the answer he got was basically, well, it keeps the door closed. Talk about a total Captain Obvious moment. So Musk had his engineers go to Home Depot, buy a $30 bathroom stall latch, and modify it for spaceflight. Or take the turbopump for their engine. Raw materials were around $10 grand, but the vendor wanted $200,000 for it. Years later, this exact thinking led SpaceX to do something the industry thought was pure madness, ditching $200 per kilo carbon fiber to build the Starship out of stainless steel for just a few bucks a kilo. That same stuff used for kitchenware turns out to get stronger in cryogenic temperatures, while handling atmospheric re-entry heat way better. It was 50 times cheaper and technically superior. But that was decades down the road. Let's jump back to 2002. In March 2002, SpaceX was born, funded with about $100 million of Musk's own cash. To put that risk in perspective, around the same time, he put $70 million into Tesla and $10 million into SolarCity. He basically dumped all his PayPal wealth into the three most capital-intensive industries imaginable. And his rocket rivals? Aerospace titans like Boeing and Lockheed Martin, with tens of billions in defense revenue. Industry experts didn't just doubt him, they openly mocked him. What stung the most was seeing his childhood heroes, like Neil Armstrong, testify before Congress against commercial spaceflight. Imagine your absolute childhood idol completely discrediting your vision. That's gotta hurt. In a TV interview later, Musk literally teared up talking about it. But crying or not, he didn't back down. Now, let's look at the space industry back then to see what SpaceX was actually up against. The gold standard for launch costs at the time was NASA's space shuttle. Each launch cost around $1.5 billion just to put 27 tons into low Earth orbit. That's a staggering $54,000 per kilo. On the commercial side, Boeing and Lockheed Martin merged their launch operations into ULA, locking down a total monopoly on government contracts. On top of that, the Air Force paid ULA nearly $1 billion a year just to keep their launch pads on standby. Yeah, literally. Doing zero launches still guaranteed them $1 billion check. With zero competition, the incentive to lower costs was non-existent. Prices just kept climbing. That's why SpaceX took the exact opposite approach, insourcing 80 to 90% of parts to build a low-cost rocket called Falcon 1. That move slashed launch costs to a fraction of the industry standard. In March 2006, Falcon 1 took its maiden flight and exploded just 33 seconds in. The next two launches failed too. Millions of dollars literally went up in smoke. By 2008, the global financial crisis hit. Lehman Brothers collapsed. Elon Musk was hanging on by a thread. Both SpaceX and Tesla were completely broke. He squeezed out his last remaining cash and even had to borrow money from friends just to cover living expenses. Everyone at SpaceX knew the deal. They only had enough cash for one last launch. Failure meant game over. And then, absolute magic happened. Falcon 1's fourth flight in September 2008 reached orbit flawlessly. SpaceX became the first private company in history to put a liquid-fueled rocket into orbit. Right on the heels of that success, NASA called and awarded SpaceX a $1.6 billion ISS resupply contract. Elon recalled blurted out, "I love you guys" on the phone and even changed his laptop password to "I love NASA." SpaceX had officially survived the brink of death. After dodging bankruptcy, the next decade for SpaceX was a total victory lap. The Falcon 9 debuted. In 2012, the Dragon capsule became the first commercial spacecraft to dock with the ISS. In 2014, SpaceX literally sued the U.S. Air Force for the right to bid on military launches monopolized by ULA, and they won. Then in 2015, Elon announced Starlink, a mega constellation aiming to blanket the Earth with global satellite internet. Many companies went bankrupt trying this before, but Elon knew the game changer was cheap launch costs, a problem he had already solved. Fast forward to 2026, SpaceX made a massive power move, merging with XAI and X, officially IPOing on NASDAQ. Now let's jump into the core of this video, unpacking their actual business model. According to their S1 filing, SpaceX's revenue breaks down into three main pillars: launch services, Starlink, and AI social media. Let's start with launch services. The model is simple. Clients pay SpaceX to put payloads or astronauts into orbit. This sector generated about $4.1 billion, growing roughly 8% year over year. Sounds pretty modest for a space company, right? But look at their sheer dominance. They ran about 170 launches, putting 2,200 tons into orbit. That's over 80% of the entire planet's total payload mass. Not just the US, we're talking the entire globe. So why is the revenue only $4 billion despite this monopoly? It comes down to two strategic masterstrokes: First, the economics of reusability. The Falcon 9's first stage booster accounts for 60% of the entire build cost. SpaceX lands that booster vertically, refuels it, and flies it dozens of times. This drives their profit margins through the roof by cutting manufacturing overhead. Second, they use most of their launch capacity on themselves. About 3/4 of all SpaceX launches are dedicated to deploying their own Starlink satellites. These internal launches don't count as revenue. They're categorized as capital expenditure for Starlink. That $4.1 billion is literally just them selling off their extra capacity. And that brings us to SpaceX's absolute cash cow, Starlink. At its core, it's a monthly subscription internet service, just like your home Wi-Fi provider. But instead of cell towers on the ground, Starlink beams signals straight down from space. The numbers here are insane. Revenue hit $11.4 billion, making up 61% of total corporate revenue. EBITDA came in at $7.2 billion. That's a jaw-dropping 63% profit margin. Their churn rate among enterprise clients is literally 0%, because in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, or at 30,000 feet, no ground provider can even compete. While past competitors went broke from the high cost of constantly replacing satellites, Starlink uses in-house rockets at baseline cost to constantly refresh their fleet. Finally, let's talk about the newest pillar, the merger with xAI and X. SpaceX is currently spending 3 times more cash on GPUs and AI infrastructure than on rockets. Elon's bold bet? Building orbit-based AI data centers where solar power is virtually unlimited, avoiding land and cooling limits on Earth. In short, SpaceX was never just a rocket company. They're an infrastructure giant using ultra-cheap space transport to dominate global internet and build the future of AI. It all stems from one core rule. If it's overpriced, we'll build it ourselves. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next deep dive.